And now we're live. So I'm going to open the YouTube stream.
It is still preparing.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, I hear myself. And Andy, can you switch us to gallery view?
Sure can. Here we are. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tea at 10 this beautiful Thursday morning. We are here,
Yeah.
Mr.
Sorry,
Colton Rodgers. Colton Rodgers is one of the mental health counselors at SUNY Genesee Community College. He is here to speak with us today about psychology careers, mental health counseling, and his life experience, I guess, as it relates to his career. So I will turn it over to Colton, and he can tell us a little bit about his background.
Yeah, first I wanted to ask, where are you from and where did you grow up? You know, just basic stuff before we go into your educational career, because I know some students are still joining us.
Sure. Well, first, can I just say thank you, Andrew and Christina, for providing me with this awesome opportunity. I think it's always a privilege and an honor to talk about the counseling profession because it's a hidden gem that not a lot of people realize exists out there. As for myself, I was born and raised in Alma, New York, so not too far from Batavia, not too far from Buffalo, kind of smack dab in the middle. But from there, after graduating from high school at St. Francis of Assisi High School in Athol Springs, New York, I started off in New York City, but then traveled the world and came back eventually after 11 years of being away. So it's always good to return home, I guess.
Wow, that's amazing. Where did you travel to? Like, where did you live?
So apart from New York City and Brooklyn, I've had the pleasure of living in Maryland, Washington, D.C. primarily, Atlanta, Georgia, Indiana, and then different places around the world like Ghana, Africa, Honduras, Cuba, the United Kingdom. So different pockets, different places of interest.
Oh, wow. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate you joining us today. For our students, Colton is also going to join us tomorrow for a workshop. We're going to post the Zoom link later for that so you can put it in your schedule. It won't be recorded like this is on YouTube. So you'll just join us in a Zoom chat room like you've been doing for advising. And some of my students are saying good morning. So
Good morning.
yeah. Okay, great. So tell us about the start of your educational career, like after high school.
So after high school, I attended what's called the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Yep. And I was there and got a undergraduate degree in pastoral counseling. So that's really what started it. During that time, I was also a Franciscan friar. So I left the priesthood / religious life right when I moved back home to Buffalo. And that's really what brought me through my travels and so forth, and allowed me to pursue counseling from the pastoral glance. Then following that, I attended Oglethorpe University in Atlanta, and that's where I pursued psychology further and got a good grip for it. And now presently, I am pursuing an additional graduate degree at Medaille College in Buffalo in clinical mental health counseling and seeking licensure for New York State. So it's been a journey that's brought me through 3 different colleges. And then, of course, you interact with other colleges throughout the process. So you get a good understanding of how big the university system is within the United States alone, but then how it connects cross-culturally in other places as well. So because of that, I was afforded with a tremendous worldly experience for counseling and had both different avenues. Catholic University of America obviously was founded with a religious tenet in mind for pastoral counseling. So you became more diversity sensitive
Mhm.
towards people's cultures, creeds, religions, spiritualities. And there's a big difference between religion and spirituality. And then people's race, ethnicity, um, socioeconomic status. So that afforded me with that education. Atlanta Oglethorpe University was primarily a behavioral school that prided itself in following the teachings of B.F. Skinner. So you kind of had
Okay.
two different versions of psychology that you were trained under for myself. And now Madai is more of a humanistic perspective. So it's kind of like tying everything together.
Okay. Do you find that you prefer one perspective over the other for yourself personally?
I do, yeah. There's a they're called theoretical orientations in psychology, and they're the main hubs. They serve as the pillars, the foundations from which psychology is built upon. And within that, you have cognitive, behavioral, humanistic, evolutionary, etc. But for me, I primarily at this point, because I think you as a therapist change in accordance with the clients and the needs of the clients. So right now I found that while serving students, the best approach is what is called rational emotive behavioral therapy and solution focused therapy. And that's basically calling them to task and saying, because I know students are less likely to come back for a second session because they're busy. They have so many academic expectations on their shoulders. So that session is all that's guaranteed. So I have to do as much healing, as much cognitive challenging, as much reframing during that time that I'm allotted with them as I can. So the theoretical orientation that's proved most helpful with that is rational emotive behavioral therapy and solution focused therapy. So I can get to the heart of the matter as fast as possible.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I never really thought about how sometimes counseling can function differently for college students. I know that when I started out in college, I did see someone on a semi-regular basis, but you are right that it is like a very busy time in people's lives, and it's sometimes you only do get the one or two sessions with someone.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And it's encouraging for those who think like, wow, this has been extremely helpful. So I'm going to come back and seek this regularly each week. You do have those students. And then you have the students who are just the drive-bys, right? They just want what they can get as much as they can get for that hour and then take it and run until they hit a crisis and then they're back, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions. One is about what topics you're going to cover tomorrow in the workshop. So I have to do that first, and then I'll ask my other question later.
Okay. So that would primarily be mindfulness. I think mindfulness, it's a, I don't know, a popular word right now, popular concept that's kind of hovering around social media and so forth. So to actually discuss and look at what mindfulness is, what its purpose, what it looks like, what its history is like, I think is fundamental before you use a word you don't know or try to involve yourself in a practice that you're not familiar with. So I think tomorrow's session is just primarily uh, addressing and looking at what is mindfulness.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one of the questions I know students ask our guest speakers all the time is, did you know your career path when you were in high school? And how did that change for you? And, why counseling? Why psychology?
Uh, so I think I'm not naive enough to say that life changes you and you change in accordance with life's path and journey. So in high school, counseling was not on my mind, even though I was always the person looking back who my friends and people that I knew would just stop over at my house crying or in crisis or wanting to talk. So I think there was always that level of, they call it the counseling golden thread that was available from just who I was. Um, but no, I wanted to actually be a chef. And as a Franciscan friar, you're under the vow of obedience. So my higher up would tell me, no, we're not allowing you to be a chef. And so then I said, well, you know, what about teaching? And so I was a high school teacher for a while in Atlanta, but there I saw the needs, and I was always doing counseling for the students as well. So it just seemed like my pastoral counseling roots at Catholic University were coming into play more and more. And as far as psychology was concerned, you get an understanding of human behavior more fully through the study of psychology. You understand why somebody might behave the way he or she does. And then you also develop a stronger interconnectedness among all people. Um, so I was interested in understanding the human journey, the similarities and differences, and then to serve as a companion to people who are on that journey, because life is tough and nobody in life comes out unscathed from hardships, crisis, or trauma. So attending to that underlying human component always always seemed as a, I don't know, integral work for me. And then I think as far as psychology was concerned, I was interested in the underlying dynamics that were going on with the brain. What happens neuropsychologically within the brain, within the person who is suffering with an addiction, within an individual who's suffering with depression, within even why we behave or socially as we do. So psychology served as that overarching discipline that explained a multitude of things that were like a mystery to me as growing up. It was the aha moment.
That's great. And I think it's important for our students to hear that, paths aren't always linear, but they can still be extremely fulfilling for each person. And sometimes that can actually benefit you in your career. How do you feel like thus far, having this, let's say, like winding path has benefited you as a counselor?
I think it's, you go into it thinking, as I think anyone does, unless they're undeclared in studies, that this is it. This is who I'm going to become. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be an architect. I'm going to be what it is. But then as you start navigating the treacherous journey of life, you realize that the many bumps that you're brought up against bump you into a different direction for a reason. And I think looking back, every moment that has been both life giving and life detracting in many ways, and have been uh, greatly beneficial but also harmful, have always been educational moments for me. I think you can't go through life unopened. You have to go through it open, and you have to remain open to what every scenario is teaching you about yourself and about people and about life in general. So I think with all of that being said, um, I've learned to become humble because, as the Native American proverb suggests, and this too is my teacher, that everything in life teaches you, and you're not above or below any other human being. You simply are on an equal footing because you're on this journey together. So I think for the counseling profession, it's allowed me to admire and to empathize and sympathize with people who are on this journey, and to be trusted enough as a counselor to be invited to be part of that intimate journey with them in a professional relationship way is extraordinary. So it's made me appreciative, it's made me humble, it's made me realize that here today, gone tomorrow, right? That, as the Buddhist proverb suggests, that everything is impermanent. So be open to change, because if you're resistant to change, you're going to have a lot of struggle and a lot of suffering. So I think that's really, in a nutshell, what it's taught me.
Oh, that's fantastic. I remember I took it was supposed to be a history of Eastern religions class in college. It became a Buddhist philosophy course. It was so tough, but I learned so much from it, and I think it really benefited me, like
Yes,
as a person, even if at the time the course was tough, so different from what I was used to.
100%. Yep. Yeah. And you know what? It's often that those courses you take or those things you do in life where you fail at it, I encourage anyone not to just become discouraged. Of course, we get discouraged when we fail anything because it's a knock to our ego. But to fall when you are falling or failing, to fall forward so you see what you're falling into and you can learn from the experience for the next time, instead of falling backward and not knowing what tripped you. So I think those courses that are difficult, those life occurrences that are difficult, those are teaching moments, and they usually have a lot more impact than those that were easy.
Mhm. What sorts of skills do you think a good counselor should have or should develop in the course of their practice, just for students who might be interested in the field?
Yeah, so I think patience, because you have to realize that it's the client's time, right? You are just allowing the client to discover the answer that is hidden within him or herself. So don't force change, right? That's one thing. So patience and not forcing change, um, acceptance of the individual totally for who they are. I think empathy, being able to empathize with the individual, even to the point where if something's emotionally triggering you, cry with them so that you show the humanness and the connection. And then active listening. You have to be a great listener and a great communicator, because you can't just say words that come off the top of your head and be insulting to somebody, right? That you have to appeal to the goodness that's there instead of concentrating on the badness that they might be involved in. So they might be an ex-convict who um, got caught again and is being referred to as a counselor and doesn't want to be there for counseling, and he got caught for, like, not only imbibing in cocaine but also dealing cocaine. So you as a counselor are challenged to look beyond that and to look at the goodness that's there and to work with that and try
Mhm.
to rehab the person. So I think those qualities: active listening, patience, unconditional positive regard, and there was something else I said. It's imperative to be a counselor.
Yeah. Andy and I, we always talk to our students about active listening, and we have lessons about active listening during our summer program, just because that seems like a soft skill that applies to so many different fields, and it just benefits you as a person, you know?
100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Colton, what would you say to students who um, maybe want to enter the psychology field because they've been told by their friends that they're a great listener? How they really sort of determine that that this sort of career is something they want?
So I think there's three things that come to mind with that. One is I caution people from doing me search in psychology, and figuring out their own selves and stuff, which it will come into play as you're doing therapy. And so don't do me search. Don't enter a field ever to do me search. Enter it to do research, right? Commit to the ongoing longevity of the field by doing research, not me search. That's one. Number two is I think people have to recognize and realize that there's a difference between vocation and occupation. Your
Hmm.
vocation as being called into life, being called to pursue something that's innately meeting your characteristics and meets you as a person is different from just following something for money. So if you have skill sets, that's a vocation, pursue that. Don't pursue what's going to get you money because you're not going to be happy. There was a statistic that came out, I think 80% of United States citizens are depressed and hate their job. So, what does that say? That nobody's pursuing their heart called vocation. They're all pursuing a money making occupation. So, I think there's that as well. And as far as psychology is concerned, take it slow. Um, Experiment, take Psych 101 class, see if it's your niche. Um, Pursue it further. There's so many disciplines and subfields within psychology. You can just be a researcher, you can be a counselor, you can be a psychiatrist, you can be a teacher, right, or professor. So there's so many disciplines. You can be an organizational or occupational development psychologist who goes to Target and Walmart and sets up why the store looks that way and gravitates you towards buying certain things in the displays.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's so many different ways and avenues that it's not just counseling. Psychology is very vast, that I think people have to consider and explore and experiment. Like, yes, you want to be in psychology? Okay, great. Now narrow that down by like 200 different avenues you can go through in psychology. So,
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
my sister's a school psych, so she, does psychology in a different way than you do.
absolutely. Yep. So
Hmm.
school psychologists, school counselors, that's huge too, right? So, and marital and family therapists, forensic psychologists who attend court cases. It's not the glorified searching after the cold killers or the murderers as people think, like CSI promotes and stuff, but a forensic psychologist is serving as an expert witness in cases for mental health on the stand and bringing evidence forward. So acting almost as an attorney.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so there's many, many avenues. And I think to answer Andrew's question, explore it, dip your toe in the water, but recognize too why you're doing it. Is it for vocational reasons or occupational reasons? Is it to do me search or research?
I think those are excellent suggestions. Something as you were talking about this, I, it came to mind that there's just so much out there. You said it could be a couple hundred different avenues that psychology takes you, and something else we often tell students is that there's a high probability that the job they have when they're out of college hasn't been created yet. And I think the combination of those two things really get me thinking. What's funny is you never know when, this research, I guess, is going to hit you. For instance, I was connected with a couple of friends who invited me to play kickball. And I've often played kickball in the Rochester Kickball League every year for a decade or more now. So, but the team has evolved, and most recently, the team was called the Psycho Ballers because there was a lot of psych people from University of Rochester and RIT. And I got talking one night with this guy who was pursuing a doctorate or doctoral work in the psychology of color.
There you go. Yeah.
What in the world is that? The psychology of color? And he says, yeah, it's a thing. He said, I actually have a psych, like a color science degree from RIT. And he said it was a small program, you know, and a lot of the people I got that master's degree with, you know, my peers in that cohort, they all went to work for Apple, and they're doing research for Apple on the color science inside an iPad and what's attractive to people and what
Mhm.
your eyes and things like that. He said I was probably the only one that didn't, and I'm now studying this color science from a psychology standpoint. And he said he was actually doing studies on like people's reaction to color pigments, not just like human to human interaction, you know, and reactions to the pigment in each other's skins, but also from like marketing standpoints. And
Sure. Yeah.
it just kind of blew my mind. And when you said, you know, the 200 different avenues, I was like, that's a perfect
One.
example of one of those 200. And it's completely obscure, right?
Correct. Yep.
So it's interesting that you say that. And sometimes I wonder, like, how do you get to that point? How do you get so deep into this psychology and kind of explore those 200 different pathways? Because our students, and ourselves, I guess, we see and we know what we're exposed to and what we learn and read. And sometimes I just feel like I don't have enough time to read all of this and understand. Students come to me and say, I want to study psychology. And I'm like, here's a list of the 200 ways you can go.
Exactly.
Right.
And be overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming. And so I just think it was interesting that you had talked about constantly thinking about your life experiences and doing the research, and sometimes the me search, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
I appreciated that input.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for sharing that story. I think I have a friend who's in art therapy and is a psychologist by trade. And they're doing a study about prison colors because there's a prison in Arizona that makes the inmates wear pink out of punishment and so forth. And they paint the cells of the inmates who are in solitary confinement pink. And what does that do to the brain in difference with blue or white? Or, so we find that, red or pink will create more aggression. So the psychologist actually recommended that they paint the walls white, a neutral color, and all of a sudden the aggressive outbursts that were occurring in that prison decreased substantially. So that just brought that to mind, about the psychology of color and how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when my parents were repainting parts of their house, I was like, you gotta do like I like this really like dark red for the kitchen or whatever. And my mom was like, no, red is aggressive. And
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna only have calm colors in this house because you know your dad gets he has a short fuse anyway.
Sure, yeah, no, and there's a lot of truth to that, right? So
Mhm.
our environment kind of induces responses. So
Yeah. I had a question about the whole licensing process. So you're getting your licensing in mental health clinical counseling. Is that what the? Yeah.
right, clinical mental health counseling. Yep.
Yes. So what does that process look like when you go through it? I know it varies state by state, but at least for New York State.
Sure. So New York State and California are extremely, extremely convoluted. So I think for myself, first of all, you need a master's at least, and then from there, some people have doctorates and pursue it as well. So master's or doctorate level. From that point, you have to have graduated, obviously, with that degree, and then after that point in time, you have to accumulate. I think I want to say it's 800 to 1,000 direct and indirect client counseling hours before you can petition for what is a permit. And then once you get a permit, you can practice and accrue, I think it's 2,000 more hours with clients, and then you can file for your license. So it's a long process, but you also have to sit for the national counseling exam, just as you would for any other profession. Like lawyers have to sit for a bar, and nurses have to sit for their nursing RN exam, and medical boards, etc. So granted, how you pass the exam, if you've accumulated the hours necessary and you have the correct degree, then New York State will grant you that. But it's different per state. Georgia was more lax and easier to obtain a license than New York State is. And surprisingly, I was looking at being dual licensed in Florida, and Florida is very convoluted too. You have to take like so many hours in Florida law, mental health law, and then you have to take an additional course in drug and alcohol rehabilitation counseling. So it's different by state, but New York State's is kind of methodical but difficult with the hours.
Okay, thank you. So has most of your direct hours been just at GCC, or have you been counseling in other realms for this licensing?
No, I've been approved to have GCC as my site, because every individual has to have a site approved by the state. And
Okay.
so GCC is my primary place. But I do pastoral counseling at different avenues around Western New York as well. But that's a different licensure process and a different, I guess you could, association. Counseling, you're under the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and then the American Counseling Association. So there's three. And then pastoral counseling has its own. So it's, I can't remember the top of my head what it's called, but you have to be
Lots
under
of
there.
acronyms.
Yeah, oh, you try to remember it all. It's impossible.
Basically, as soon as you pursue a type of professional path, it's just a bunch of acronyms forever and ever.
Yes.
Like, yeah, that's a lesson for whoever wants to study anything.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like is, I don't want to say your end goal, but like, once you're done with your licensing, what would you like to do after?
I would like to continue in college counseling, I think, or I think being part of a private practice, not having my own, but being a independent contractor for a private practice and counseling through them. I have that, as well as crisis counseling, etc. I'd also like to go on for my doctorate after this. Hopefully the COVID-19 thing will be out of existence so we can pursue our studies accordingly. But yeah, granted that everything's in the right frame, I'd like to pursue my doctorate in clinical psych.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't have, I'm going to see if anyone has any other questions, but we can wrap it up soon. This is usually how long our sessions last for our
No, that's fine.
10. Normally we have tea, but today I just have water, but I think you have tea.
I do,
so,
yeah.
So there you go. Are there any words of advice or wisdom that you'd like to share with our students, high school students who may be unsure about their path, or, during this time of this pandemic, anything?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to be said, but I think the high school students don't quit. I think it's easy enough to become overwhelmed, but you are our future. You are our foundation that we're basing upon. You are the ones that give somebody like me hope, hope through the change that you can offer. and hope through the different things that you can initiate by yourselves. I think high school students don't get enough credit.
Mhm.
I think you're profoundly intelligent after working and teaching in a high school. I think that you need to be heard and you need to be understood and you need to be listened to and respected just as any adult should be. So I think know that there are advocates out there for yourself. Um, I think during this pandemic, remain on the boat during the stormy sea. Don't give up and reach out and ask for help where you need it. Ask for guidance. Don't be too stubborn. I know that statistics show in high school students the immense amount of depression and anxiety and suicide that's present. Please, 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 if you're struggling with anything like that, reach out to a counselor, right? Because we need you to continue and to ensure our future. You are our hope. So, with that being said, don't give up.
Thank you.
Great advice, Colton. Thank you.
I don't have any other questions.
Yep. And I don't think,
Really informative.
yeah, our students have been a little quiet this morning.
That's okay.
They are listening, though, Colton.
Yeah.
All right.
Colton, would it be all right if students contact you if they have questions about psychology?
Sure. Yeah.
Degrees or
Absolutely. I'd be open to that. They can contact me through my GCC email. I think I'm watching that like a hawk. So between the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., I'll usually respond right away. So
Okay.
I don't know if you have that and can forward that to them through.
Yeah, we could.
Okay.
I had a student said they didn't ask questions because they're listening and you're very interesting.
That sounds like a counselor's response. Very interesting. Very nice.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Anything that you want to add, Andy, before we, finish up for this tea at 10?
I don't think so. I want to extend the thank you again, Colton. It's been very informational. You seem like a person, and I look forward to maybe us or our students utilizing you as a wonderful resource in the future too.
Absolutely.
And of course, we hope everyone jumps on with us for our webinar tomorrow with Colton on mindfulness.
Fantastic. And thank you both again for the privilege and the honor of being part of this. Again, as I said before, and this too is my teacher, so I hope that whatever I spouted out and whatever was good for them serves as a vital resource on their journey forward.
I think it will be.
Fantastic.
I feel it. And just a quick reminder to our students, we have Letchworth Advising at 11 and then Alexander at 2 p.m. So go in your Google portfolios, click on the link for the Zoom advising. If you can't reach us on there, you can also call in and contact us any way you can.
Absolutely.
All right.
We will sign off for today. We thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow for Fun Friday with our tea at 10. This week has gone by like a snowstorm, I guess, in Western New York. So have a wonderful day. We will see you tomorrow, and make sure to get your friends to join in. We'll have some of our summer teachers joining us, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Take care.